Hey everyone, how are you doing? I assume before lunch, right? So hungry. Um, I still have my time running, so I'm going to ask a few questions. So I saw that my talk, my sharing is in kind of a group called Machine Learning and AI. But just to verify that I'm not mistaken, like who is like in the dev team but not necessarily developing machine learning and AI? Okay, and anyone that is developing machine learning and AI? Okay, got it. So I got a mix. Shit, sorry. Um, very different like interest, right? One is like exploiting AI for software, and the other is developing. I'll talk a bit about the mix. Okay, great. So uh, I hope I can start. I hear a bit of an echo. Are you hearing well? Great. So I'm Itamar Friedman, the CEO and co-founder of Kodo. Um, you're going to see I'm going to talk a lot about quality of development, and Kodo stands for that. Specifically, I'm going to try to convince you all that you need to invest. That's my point. If I need you to take one thing from this talk, is that I want to try to convince you that vibe coding and all that is super cool and useful to some extent, and you should invest in building the second brain of your dev orgs, and that could push you in a viable way to the next generation of software development. Okay? And the technical details are around context awareness, how to inject testing into it, and having a multi-agent system. Okay? So a little bit about Kodo. I'm actually not going to talk about Kodo too much, although intervene into the talk. We are the AI code review solution, and we serve thousands of teams out there. We also have an open source that I'm going to talk a bit in the end. We believe that code review has some, standard, let's say, basically, I like to say that code review is subjective. There are some overarching standards that we all agree, but there's a difference between what a startup and an enterprise would call quality. And there's a difference between a financial institution or social app, what they will call quality. So we believe in open source, that where the community could think together what quality means, okay? So that's why we have an open source, but most of our product is not open source, and with that, we serve millions of people, like 2 million installation, growing customer base, and scanning 2 million PRs a month, etc. Okay, I had to do that. I'm the CEO. I need to put that commercial, right? But what I actually want to talk to you again is about the fact that the world is changing, and I want to be a bit nostalgic about that, okay, in order to convince you. So back in the days, I'm actually, I don't know how I look, but I'm actually an old model, a Model 82. So I remember those days where social media was very different and than it is today, right? But it's not how we communicate with the world. Like you can see before and after, right? And I think like to some extent, like the same thing go with knowledge. Like back in the day, like we would go to a library, we would go to a movie, even like or learn from our colleagues in the office. And today it was auto-generated, by the way, so it's not very accurate. It's one of my points that I'm going to make. Okay, so don't get into the details, but roughly speaking, like now the knowledge, like we consume it very differently, and right, like and even being a bit more specific, I remember those days that I would go to some, to my parents' bookshelf to get like encyclopedia or whatever, like, and these days, like my kids are not even thinking about doing something of sort, and so it's nostalgia. But do you want to go back to those days? Like it's cool, but yes, like I see between no and no-ish, right? Like, sorry. Like I think that's how we're going to think about software development in a few years, right? I actually saw someone speaking in one of the talks saying, I am actually one of the developers that did coding before AI assistant. Remember that was like, so now it sounds ridiculous, right? Like, but it will, like in a few years, like a lot of the knowledge and where we're going to consume it is going to be very different, and we will be nostalgic about it, but that's where we're heading to. Okay, so while being nostalgic, don't, you know, I want to keep, like, be open-minded, because that's where I think we're going to a change that looks something like this. That big change. Right now, maybe we don't see it, but that's where we're heading. Okay? So I think basically what we're seeing, that apps and now agents are doing things for us, right? And the second thing is that we're seeing digitized aggregated knowledge. That's basically the difference between the library, and to some extent, to Google, knowledge, based knowledge. So for example, apps, basically there are agents behind them, right? Google search engine is an agent, whether it's an AI agent or not. It does a lot of the work for us on bringing that knowledge from the digitized world. Cool, so looking into the future, this is the very high-level architecture of how I think like the architecture of software development gonna look like. Okay, so we're going to have still specs, specifications, we're gonna have tests, we're gonna have implementation code, right? But there are going to be multiple agents that are going to work for us, and each one of them has a dedicated task. And that's one of the things I wanted to convince you. There's not going to be one agent rules them all. Okay, again, sanity check. Sanity check, do you think there's going to be one agent eventually with GPT-7 or Anthropic Opus like 700? One agent, simple, like basic agent that will completely do everything for us. If you think that's right, raise your hand. Okay, like only as it was suggested only as a premium tier. So let me tell you why I think like just de facto, like sorry, just like from a perspective that not many people think about why it won't happen. Models are still statistical creatures, and they will do mistakes no matter what. I don't know if you agree with some level, and we will still want to have some kind of concepts around privileges, around security, etc. And different agents will have different permissions and different tasks just for that sake. That's not the not the only reason, but I just want to open your mind. And there's other reasons. For example, user experience. Eventually, those agents, super agent like of the future, they're going to still work with us, right? We're going to navigate them, use them. We will want different interfaces with them. So there are many reasons why eventually we'll have a multi-agent system with different purposes for each. Right now, by the way, there is another reason, because you really need to work hard on making specific agents work well, and you need to narrow their task. And that's one of the things I hope to show or tell. But that's where we're heading. And then, very importantly, there is a small box there that says Software Development DB. Notice that I didn't say Codebase, right? And I think that's part of the transformation we're going to see, like from a code base to a database that includes more than the code base. For example, what are the standards, the rules, the best practices, like discussions among two senior developers and some pull request that they discuss between each other about some idea that we want to store in order to the AI or the tools to use later, okay? Now, one last thing before this slide, I did write like 3.5, and what the heck, like why is it 3 and why 0.5, etc. And that's one of the points I want to share with you in a second. Any critical question? I know it's not standards, but I just want to make sure this is an important slide. Any question? Sorry? Okay, that's exactly my question. Like, why is this 3.5? Let's talk a little bit. I just want to tell you, and this is another like shameless plug. This everything, the system you're seeing, this is not far away. Okay, like this is, for example, Jensen. It's not AI generated. This is Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, shouting out Kodo, context engine. If we can turn a little bit the light on the front, that will be helpful. Shouting out like about Kodo, like a solution. That's him on the bottom, and like just a couple of months ago in GTC. So we are heading towards that direction of a full system. So let's build this up, the generations that I mentioned, and being asked why 3.5. Okay, so do you see that in the back, like reasonably? Okay, great. So so about like AI for in general, tools for developers, and specifically AI tools for developers, I think there are different levels. Like there's some nice to have, we like them. Okay, I have like more than a dozen of tools I like to have, and then I have some dev tools that I really love, and then there are some tools that are game changers. It's hard, right? We're good in replacing our tools. And it's hard to get to that level. And the question is like are probably if there are generations, I'm talking about 3.5, for example, if there are generation of tools, probably they're trying to, being more and more meaningful in your life and follow this line. But at the same time, I think that like just having the y-axis, like of how much you love or need these tools are a bit problematic because it depends. Are you doing a project or are you doing it for enterprise software? Are you like a noob or a senior, etc.? So it's hard to put it on everything on one spectrum. I did try to put it on the x-axis, but please bear with me. I know like we can cut the x-axis in many ways. So I think like generation 1.0 was the autocomplete. You write your code and just help you complete the next few lines. First it was 1 line, then it was 5 lines, then maybe 20 lines, depending on. And I think like for many of us that already knew to program, we like this. It helps us to move a bit faster, right? And then at some point, like we started having the chat interface because the LLM were even not only being able to help us complete more lines of code, but actually complete full function classes. Oh, thank you. Complete full classes and even like small tasks with the agentic chat. I think at this point, actually, like you can even, if you don't know a specific programming language, you can even try to do that with those tools. So it enables like more even to the less senior people to do a lot. For the senior people, actually, I think the right thing to write there is actually love-like-hate relationship, because what this actually created is for the senior people to review a lot of code that is done without too much care. Please bear with me again, like I'm not saying everyone. I heard 2 stories this week. I got open from a senior developer. I got a PR that it was obviously vibe coded, and then I gave a feedback, and it was obviously I got an update that was vibe coded with that feedback. Like, and so like I hear love-like-hate relationship about that. And then the Gen 3.0 is where actually the agent worked good enough that we can start using it like as end-to-end workflows, like for testing, for review, for also outside of the ID. And supposedly that's a game changer. I'm going to say that I'm not necessarily agreeing with that. I think that for like POV, like proof of concept projects, for simple, websites and even games that you don't necessarily want to commercialize and maybe a bit scary security-wise and quality-wise, but if you, I guess like just to make sure, who vibe coded here, or who vibe coded, whatever cursor, copilot, etc. Okay, half. So it's actually really helpful if you use Lovable, Base 44, and Bolt, for example, you can complete full projects end to end, even if you're a noob, or if you're a developer and you want like to do like a product manager can show how things gonna look like even without finishing. So that's like why I think it is a game changer. Now, the thing is that it started with an ID plugin, it moved to an ID fork, right? And eventually, like one of the reasons this is becoming a game changer is because it's an ID across the SDLC. Sorry, it's an AI across the SDLC. Sorry about that, right? Now, my claim is that like vibe coding was enabled with the ID forks, and basically the real beginning of game changer, like changes in how we do software, started when we can start to introduce AI across the SDLC. Because writing code is just like 30% of what we do as developers. I mean, like for code we care about, not for like side project, where probably 90%. But the thing is, and that's exactly my point in this talk, I think like the real game changing is going to happen when we turn our AI assistant from stateless to stateful machine. And again, I spent like 6 minutes just to try to convince you that this is where we're going, because I claim that the first few generations were just install and run. Right, autocomplete, put it in my ID, that's it. And as the generation grow, you need to invest as a dev, as a single developer, as a tech lead, as a director of developer engineering, developer experience platform, or just a tech lead in a development team. Okay, so that's like why I'm going on the motivation. That's last motivation element, and then I'm going to get into the details, okay? So it's super interesting that, for me, that vibe coding is actually just started this year, right? Like for me, it looks like 2 decades already, but as I mentioned before, but it actually started this year, mentioned by Andrej Karpathy, and it didn't take too much time, like only 2 months, where people actually took it into software they really care about, and they bumped into issues. But as I mentioned, I still think it's very valuable. But yet again, it wasn't just that person, and it wasn't me, by the way, although maybe we have the same hairstyle. This is another person that is like saying that, I don't know if you know Gergely, like he's very like known in our field, that he's hearing a lot of people saying that just pure vibe coding, the Gen 1, 2.0, 2.5 is not enough for software we care about. And just 2 weeks ago, that's it. Do you see the community saying vibe coding is dead, the Gen 2.0 supposedly? And now I don't think it's right. I try to say like that we realize it's not as viable as we maybe imagined for software we care about, and it just needs to evolve. And the same person, Andrej Karpathy, if you know, that invented the term vibe coding, like just a few months later said, hey, vibe coding actually contrasts Gen 2.0 tools contrast code I actually care about, and here is how to deal with it. And then like he mentions context and workflows, and that's exactly my point. Moving from the next generation is moving from vibe coding, which is context flow review, into slightly more responsible flow, where we include like proper planning, proper review, quality workflows, like, and how to remediate issues, etc. Eventually, you want to use AI to help all the dev org to level up the context and like planning into a senior level. You want to help the flow that we do with vibe coding to turn it into something viable by running background agents, workflows that are as you go to that verify quality. And you want to help the reviewer to deal with all the code generated by AI. A small story, maybe you know this meme. I know you wake up in the morning, you're a senior developer, you want to review code, you probably like took your coffee, you have 40 minutes, right? So if you open for me a PR that have 5 lines of code, I'll give you 50 suggestions. If it has 50 lines of code, I'll give you 5 suggestions. And if it's 500 lines of code, looks good to me, and move on, right? That's not good, right? And so like with this thousands lines of code generated by an agent, and I did like a short try just to generate a few unit tests, and I got in 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, I got like 500 lines of code, okay, like that in 5 minutes. We have to help the reviewer and help the reviewer to act upon and remediate issues that was given to him, her, and etc. And eventually, like that's how we responsible evolved from vibe coding into, you know, leaning on being rigorous and correct and ownership, etc. Okay. So at Codo, we focus our main, you know, the way companies start using our tools. We have a full like platform, a full set of them is around code review. And when we're looking at the future, we're thinking, how do we shift left and provide those code correctness suggestion as you code, and not just at the gateway. It's very important to have that gateway, as I mentioned, like thousands of lines of code coming for the reviewer. We must help that reviewer. But how can we, to begin with, can give that suggestion before? And basically, what we're looking at is the V-shape of software development turning to something else. But before that, I just want to make sure, if you go in Wikipedia or ChatGPT and ask the V-shape of software development, the y-axis is executable content. The x-axis is over time. So I know some of you advocate for TDD and all these things. Yeah, some are religious about it. I'm not saying it's not where we want to go with in the future. We do, but right now most people, like, this is how you develop, right? Like, you start with planning, you go to code, you test, and then review. But I think the opportunity with AI is actually turn this V-shape into something that we call shift up, more squeezed V-shape, okay? Like, for example, if an AI can help during the planning already start generating code and executing like high-level review suggestion, maybe you can refine the plan from the get-go and have a better plan, etc. So that's what I could talk about from vibe to viable, okay? Like turning, like having a context engine and workflows and learnings by the AI system in order to eventually push your engineering team to Gen 3.5, Gen 4, etc. Okay, so far motivation. I intentionally spent most of the time on it. I'm going to get a bit more specific. Any questions so far? Okay, cool. So the number one thing that is most important is the context engine. Okay, context engine, because if you think about it, when you're doing planning as a senior developer, you're going and fetching information to do a proper planning. When you're coding, your quality of coding depends on which context you have. For example, are you aware that there is an API in another microservice that is doing the work that you're about to code or not? If you're aware of that, you have that context, you might not duplicate code, right? So almost everything, I just gave 2 examples, are around the context engine, okay? Now what is the context when you're talking about context engine? The first of all, obviously, is the code. And then there are the documentation of different types. And then there are the PRs themselves. Like 60% of organization, they write a lot of knowledge and information inside the PR review. Some actually do that in Teams or Slack, and a lot of information is there. I see some people are laughing, like just like talking about PRs in Slack or so. And in our brains, some of the information is not downloaded into digital media, and there are more. Like, for example, logs and production data. Why do I mention all these? Because I think like a perfect ideal context engine will include all these. And this is like what I mean by that you guys need to invest in context engine in order to get like a proper context engine for your AI tools. So I think like when you're thinking about all this like data, pieces of data, and then you want to have an engine that serves that data into tools, right? Like, how is it going to do that? It's a really, really hard task. And these pieces of information, they're very different from each other in nature. Code is very formal, logs maybe not, etc. So we believe a context engine needs to be, and I guess like the right side is not very clear, but I'm going to talk over it. It needs to be like the system approach. So it includes the knowledge itself that needs to be digested. You need tools and you need agents. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean like, for example, if you're using Cursor and now you want Cursor to use the context engine, then it requires not just endpoint, give me context, okay, and that's it. Probably underneath that call from Cursor, for example, to the context engine will include call to different tools, to could be even different agents with different privileges and tools. I mean like MCPs, for example, that behind them there's different access to different data, etc. So basically, it's a system. Okay, like once upon a time, until 1 or 2 years ago, when we thought about context, what we did is we threw everything into a database, right, a vector DB. Everything goes into the same format, and then we have like a simple RAG. Just to make sure, who knows what a retrieval augmented generation RAG? Okay, so basically like it's like a vectorized search of embedding in the embedding space and like taking data and turning almost like everything into like vectors, and that's the basics. That's okay, but it's not enough because usually it gives you so much noise, and it's not as useful as you would want it to be. Think about as a person. Usually, to bring the context, you don't just like go to your brain and tell me, give me everything that is relevant. You go and fetch the first layer of information you have in mind. You go investigate that, see if it's enough for the request, and you basically do like multi-turns in your head and with the data itself in order eventually to provide context, and you do different type of thinking. Eventually, that second brain I'm talking about have a similar, like basically architecture. A small like shameless plug. Like you don't have to do that alone. At Kodo, while we are #1 tool of ours is an AI code review. What we care about the most technology-wise is that context engine, because in order to provide proper code review suggestions, we have to have the right context. Okay, so that's what we do at Kodo, like AI code review and building context engine for the dev org, and helping to shift left. Like code review, giving you those suggestions in the IDE, etc., in the CLI. But mostly what I wanted to tell you is that you can try to find an open source tool for building context agents, and there are a few of them that are really good. Or you can use like tools like Kodo. What's very important, that context engine must learn over time. Okay, like you have to have interaction between the user usage to what is actually being learned and saved. Sorry, and we, by the way, learned that not all clouds have a sufficient embedding model, like a good enough embedding model. So we needed to develop our own model. I want to just tell you that if you're going to build your own context engine, and it really depends which models you're going to do to do the vector DB, make sure you have benchmarks and like how you're going to test whether your context engine works or not. I can tell you that what NVIDIA did, for example, and there is a blog post for that, they created like a 100 questions. They ask their developers, give me like a couple of questions that you would want AI to be able to answer. And they collected 100 questions with the answers. And whenever they checked different context engines, for example, Kodo's, and you saw like Jensen shout out about Kodo, they compared it versus a benchmark. So you want to have like a benchmark for that. We realized that some of the embedding model is a model that doesn't turn a text into text or text into image. It turned text into vectors, so you can put them in the database. We are not good enough. We needed to develop our own. Okay, so I think that so far, when you're going to talking about this slide, basically what you need to do in order to create your DevOrg second brain and improve code generation with that, or software development with AI with that. It's a context engine, learning, and workflows. And I try to explain a bit about the context engine, that it includes different types of data, and like you need to think about how you actually ingest and then service that to different agents. But before that, in the beginning of talk, I tried to explain that I think that it's not just one agent. For example, Cursor, Copilot, etc. One of the exciting things about the generation that we're seeing is that you can take AI and put it everywhere, in your CLI, in your terminal, in your CI/CD, etc. So that's what the context engine needs to serve. And each one of these workflows, they could have different UX UI. So for example, this is like unit test generation that you can do with Kodo, and I didn't want to do a live demo because these days, like the agents they tend to work for 5-10 minutes, and the LLMs became good enough in doing that, which is great. And on the way, like the agent would actually generate tests and run them, and even install packages if needed, and eventually get to a point where code coverage reaches the target that I asked it to. And you will find out that, for example, in this specific case, we implemented like UX UI that is specific for unit test generation. Why? Because I don't know, for those who are using like those Cursor, etc., Cloud Code, they can work for you for minutes up to an hour and eventually not necessarily get to the point. So one thing that you can do is create a lot of rules to navigate them to the right place. But eventually, like having the dedicated UX UI and not just the rules is how we believe you can actually, in addition to bringing the right context, think should look like. And for example, in another example, Kodo, as I mentioned, more focused on quality and review and testing, etc. This is, for example, our CLI, our terminal tool with a designated interface for dealing and solving like issues that were raised during the coding. So you can see like a very straightforward and easy interface that is dedicated for finding and solving issues. Now, while at Kodo we focus on some of the user interface, I think that you folks in your organization would still want to build your own. Okay, like think about it. Is like do you have any like dev platform initiatives in your company? Then if there are, okay, if you're in that type of company, you probably also want to have dev platform like initiatives related to building interface that are fitting your requirement and for streamlining your software development lifecycle. Don't only use, for example, my suggestion, okay, only Cloud Code with its interface to solve root code analysis, okay? If you want to build a tool if you want to have root code analysis, you might want to have a dedicated interface and dedicated workflow for that. Okay, so that's another example of interface that is dedicated for issues and solving issues. I can click on each one of them and it will start operating on it. And another last example is interface inside GitHub, for example. So this is a PR where you get from Kodo a walkthrough that first gives categories into what was changed. And this specific line, that tells you that there was a configuration change. You can't believe how many times a week we're hearing that this saves companies from embarrassing stuff in production, right? How many times it happened to you, like a problem in configuration, actually, broke something, just a configuration change. So this is a simple, straightforward, dedicated UX to surface like different types of changes. Okay, so this is an agent. If you remember my suggestion, a multi-system agent. This is an agent that is dedicated on the right place, on the right time, to surface that a configuration change was what was made. Another UX UI example is this command that is specific for verifying rules, like things you want to comply to. For example, you want to verify that whatever was written, the specification that was written in the ticket, was actually implemented. In this case, it's green, for example, but in this case, it's actually has like a red dot. Okay, so yet again, a user interface, a user experience is meant to verify something very specific that otherwise developers might miss. So that's it. I think before I summarize everything, my point was that improving code generation for software development is go through like building the context engine of your org. Having systems that helps you understand how the system learns over time, that I didn't touch too much. Having workflows, for example, related to testing, to code review, to other type of root cause analysis, etc., that you build with specific tools that, as open source or other tools you can build or buy, etc., with dedicated UX UI, because eventually if you want to get to a stateful machine that streamlines the entire software development, and that's where we're heading. Okay, and you need to invest in it in order to get there. Last thing before I finish, if I have like 2 minutes for questions, I do want to tell you that we have at Kodo, like ambassador plan, we have an open source called PR Agent. It is important, like PR not press release, PR pull request. Like it's very different. It's somewhat different from our own commercial product, but it's the leading. But it is a leading open source for code review. And the reason we believe in that open source is because we always push what standard means for the community together. It could be very different between different organizations, and we need that voice. And we are growing that community. And the second bullet here is that if you are open source maintainer or want to contribute, etc., we are going to open up with more maintainers. And the second thing, in order to push the open source community, starting from early December, we might bring it to November, we're going to give our code review tools for open source for free. Like, to say it simple, tokens and API calls on us. Okay, so we're going to announce it as collaboration with Google, but I'm telling you upfront that you can like go to our alpha, program. If you search Kodo, for example, and GitHub on Marketplace, it's already up there. You can start using it for free. We're just like getting more feedback before officially announcing it. So I just was very important for us that we really love working with the open source community, and that's it. You can find us if you have like questions, want to learn more about anything, please find us in, it's like the one floor to the bottom and on the left, 305A booth. And thank you very much.